I hope you're doing well. Welcome to this very special episode of Endeavour News. I'm your host, Hector. And I'm here with my co-host, Gilbert.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
And I'm here with very special guests. We got two today with NYPrepper
How's it going?
and Jeff Nyquist. Two today with
Nice to be here.
NYPrepper
Awesome.
How's it going?
Yeah, so
and
today's
Jeff
a very
Nyquist.
special day for Endeavour News,
Nice
having
to be
both Jeff Nyquist and New York Prepper on the show today. We're going to be discussing a lot of interesting stuff from Ukraine and Russia, what's next for Ukraine, Europe, and Putin, and NATO, and just give everyone like a greater geopolitical context as to what's going on right now. You know, everything you need to know. So, by the way, you should definitely check out New York Prepper's channel. He's a real patriot and he's super smart, super onto it guy, and you'll learn so much from his broadcasts. So that's why we have him here today with Jeff Nyquist, so they can give us the real rundown on what we're experiencing right now. And I'll just talk a little bit more, and I'd like to give people sort of like a brief assessment of what's happened so far at day 1314. So just because people may have been busy and stuff, may have not have kept up with everything, but Trump has approved long-range strikes into Russian territory using American weapons. We have Hungarian drones violated Ukrainian airspace. Zelensky said preliminary they could have been conducting reconnaissance of industrial potential in Ukrainian border areas. We have the Afibsky refinery droned again. A Su-34 shot down. Two AN-26 cargo planes droned. Russia forecasts reduction of natural gas export in 2025 by over 10%. We have a budget deficit of Russia for 2025 will increase by another 1.94 trillion rubles and amount to 5.74 trillion or 2.6 of GDP. The number of available vacancies for people with disabilities in Russia has risen by 300,000 in 2025, and Trump called Russia a paper tiger with a collapsing economy and allowed the military victory of Ukraine. So Trump has actually said a lot of things, but including NATO countries should shoot down Russian planes if they enter their airspace. I think Orban will stop buying Russian oil if they speak to him. I will speak with him. And yeah, there's been a lot going on. So I'm sure we'll get into all of this today. And Greg and Jeff will give us greater insight into everything here. So, without further ado, let's jump straight into Ukraine's war situation. So, guys, where do you think Ukraine stands right now, militarily and politically? It seems like they're in a much better position now, especially given the recent escalations. It seems Poland is fully engaged and prepared for battle now. And Greg, would you say that's right? Is that what we're seeing? What insights can you give us into how Poland is right now?
Okay, yes. So yeah, Poland is in a state of war preparation right now. The government in Poland, for those of you guys who don't know Polish politics, it recently switched like halfway through the Ukraine war. So the Polish government is now divided. We have a conservative or the equivalent of like a Republican traditional Polish president. He just got elected, Nawrocki. He replaced Duda. Um, and the legislature in Poland is actually leftist. So it's a divided government. And historically, the Polish leftists were always very anti military buildup. They didn't want to build up the Polish military too much. And they were all about working more with NATO and trusting Poland's security to their NATO relationships that they have with European partners rather than building up a strong Polish military. and it was actually the current Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, who in 2010, when the Polish president Lech Kaczynski was killed in a Russian plane crash, in Russia, the Polish president with his entire cabinet was flying to the Katyn forest in western Russia that's near Smolensk. This is an area where the NKVD in the Soviet Union under Stalin killed like all of Poland's top generals, military officers, professors, and things like that. He wanted to basically eliminate the upper echelon of Polish society right after World War II so the Poles wouldn't be able to regenerate their society and be a threat. So he rounded all the smartest people in Poland. He rounded them up in this forest in western Russia and killed like thousands of them. And so every year there's a memorial there, even though it's on Russian soil, there's a memorial. And in 2010, the Polish president at the time, who was a right-wing president and very anti-Putin, his plane mysteriously crashed right before landing at the airport in Smolensk. Now, when that happened, the current prime minister, the guy who's in charge now, Tusk, he basically kissed Putin's behind. Okay, Putin said that this was a tragedy, this was an accident, and he just basically accepted it. You know, basically like bending over for Putin. You know, to put it in plain terms. You know, and now all of a sudden Tusk has done like a complete 180, and he's like the total opposite. He's like very pro-war. He's building up the military and stuff like that. So I wouldn't trust the leadership of Poland necessarily. But the fact that even the leftists are building up the Polish military so strongly now is a big sign. But the divided government also in Poland kind of prevents decisions from being made very easily because you have a leftist legislature and then you have, you know, a president who's right wing. So it kind of paralyzes things. But Poland, uh, you know, they've been dealing with Russia for many years. Way before the Ukraine war, they've been preparing for this day. In my opinion, not fast enough, but lately they've been building up this massive defense line along the border of Belarus and Kaliningrad. Uh, it, Unfortunately, it's hard to find out a lot of the details about it because the whole area is, you know, cordoned off by Polish military. You can't get anywhere near it. So there's not a lot of like, you know, press coverage. Like you're not going to be able to just walk up to this defense line and take videos of it. So we don't really know a lot of the details other than a couple of press conferences. But basically, it's going to have minefields, anti-tank obstacles. They're going to pre-position bunkers, not just for protecting troops, but also to protect civilians. They're going to build like concrete shelters for air raids. They're also going to pre-rig a lot of the roads along the border of Belarus and Russia with explosives in case they need to blow them remotely if the Russians are coming over the border. They're also building bunkers with ammunition, artillery shells, and different things that they would need right there on the border for the fighting soldiers. Okay, so massive defense line going up right now, but a lot of Polish military analysts that are kind of not with the current government are criticizing the buildup, saying that it's kind of although it sounds impressive, a lot of people are worried that Poland, while they're building up this big defense line, which sounds great, you know, to stop a big land invasion. But if we look at what Russia's been doing in Ukraine, they've actually stopped with the big land movements, and they're now just using drones and glide bombs. And you know, Russia has been very successful, as we've seen, using cheap ammunition and uh, you know, finding ways to circumvent all the fancy NATO air defenses, like just a few weeks ago when Russia sent those drones into Poland, NATO was saying that this was a big success. We were able to shoot these drones down, but we used multi-million dollar missiles to shoot down drones that were made of styrofoam. That's not a success. And NATO right now, Poland in particular, also doesn't have a system for shooting down these drones. They have the Patriot systems. They have the ballistic missile defense system in northern Poland and Romania, which is good for Oreshniks and medium range ballistic missiles. We have all that stuff, but we don't have something for short range air defense and dealing with these drones. We can't keep using our multi-million dollar missiles to shoot down styrofoam drones. So that was a failure on NATO's part, and it demonstrated a gap. And I think that was part of what Russia was trying to do, is they wanted to test NATO's air defenses, and they proved that NATO is not prepared for large drone swarms at this time. If we went to war with Russia, they could launch 500 Shahed drones a night, and our air defenses in NATO would not be able to cope with that. Ukraine deals with it every single night, and they shoot down 90% of them. And when 20 drones fly into Poland, it's a big deal for NATO, and they got to scramble, uh, billions of dollars of assets, F-35s, F-16s to shoot down, styrofoam drones. So there's a big gap there. And Also, you have to look at where the drones are being shot down. We are letting Russian drones fly into NATO airspace, and we're shooting them down when they're in NATO airspace, which makes absolutely zero sense. That would be like the equivalent of leaving your door open and allowing someone to come in off the street, a home invader, and then dealing with them once they're in your house, in your living room. You don't do
Right.
that. If somebody's trying to kick your door in, you don't open the door and say, okay, come in now. You deal with the threat outside of your border, not in your border. That doesn't make any sense. What if these drones had chemical warheads? What if they had neurotoxins? We don't know what these projectiles have. And NATO is stupidly allowing them to fly into NATO airspace because they're afraid of triggering Russia. And meanwhile, we are fully justified under international law to shoot them down over Ukrainian territory, not in Polish or Romanian or German territory. So, but
Yeah, absolutely. That was a brilliant breakdown. That was, and that just goes to show the problem that yeah, NATO is facing in trying to deter the Russians from advancing. So it's one. Oh well, first, Jeff, did you have anything that you might like to add on to what Greg said in terms of Poland and where just in general, where you think Ukraine stands right now, military and politically? What are your thoughts on this, and what are your thoughts on what Greg just said?
Well, I think you've got you've got a fighting front of 700,000 to 800,000 Ukrainians that have been fighting for almost 4 years, holding the Russians back. This war has evolved from the first Russian missteps. The Ukrainians have adapted. They've gotten support from Europe and the U.S., and they've been very ingenious. A lot of the best engineers and weapons builders were in the Ukrainian Soviet Republic during the Soviet Union, and a lot of that ingenuity was put to use. So the Ukrainians have decimated the Russian Black Sea Fleet. They pushed it back to ports further away. They can't even use Sevastopol anymore. They unprecedented new things in warfare. The Ukrainians have shot down an aircraft with a drone. They've used drones as anti-aircraft. They've used them as anti-ship. They've used them to kill troops, of course, very famously, tanks, artillery, supply trucks. So it's changed the face of warfare. The problem is Europe, except for a few countries in Europe, like Sweden perhaps, and Poland under the Law and Justice Party, there's been a reluctance to use that 3 years wisely to get ready. And the United States hasn't either, because what Russia has is not just Russia, it's Russia, North Korea, and China. It's all their economies with the shoulder to the wheel. producing enormous quantities of ordnance. And what everybody has missed is that this period of warfare has been used by the Russians to mobilize. They've been cut off from a lot of their imports from Europe. China has filled the gap that had to be planned. That could not have just been done on the fly. The Chinese set up the machine tools in the factories to build the things that could replace what the Europeans imported and Russia needed for its economy. They've done it. You've got, look, North Korea's produced more artillery shells to put into this war than the U.S. has. So they're built up militarily, their military industry and everything. In the United States, Canada, NATO countries, you have all the workers, the blue collar workers, the people who know how to build things. They've been outsourcing everything to China. The industrial base, we don't have a military industrial base. People talk about the military industrial complex in the United States. Look, at the end of the Cold War, they put all the contractors in one room and said, you're going to have to decide how you're going to, buy each other out, because there's not going to be very many people in this room in another couple of years. And that's what's happened. So look, we've really fallen behind, but it's not, we have good quality stuff. But the problem is that we can't build very much of anything compared to what one Chinese port can produce more ships in a year than all the ports in the United States can produce in 2 or 3 years. We just don't have the capacity to deal with this. And so what it looks like to me the Russians are preparing to do is the Russians are preparing to go into the Slovak Gap to connect Kaliningrad, which is a part of Russia that's in between, on the Baltic coast between Poland and Lithuania, that's not contiguous with Russia or Belarusia, and they're going to link it up by invading the southern part of Lithuania and the northern part of Poland, where there are no troops defending. And you know how we know this is Japanese tourists in Europe have had this funny thing. They all want to go there and take pictures of those parts of Poland and Lithuania. They all want to go. They want to go there. And the other thing the Russian drones are really noted for doing is they're looking at the Skagerrak, the straits entering the Baltic, and they're looking at the Kiel Canal. And they're looking at these two places. And of course, that means they're planning to mine it. And I don't know if you noticed, there was a Kilo-class submarine coming out of the Med. And of course, they can lay mines. And that submarine had some kind of problem, maybe a battery caught fire. It ejected a bunch of fuel, and some folks think that submarine got into so much trouble it suicided itself once it got past the sea shelf into deep water. Went into deep water and it dived, and it baby crashed because they didn't want it to fall into NATO hands, because that thing had some kind of a problem, maybe onboard fire, where it was really crippled. And this is what a Russian submarine commander can be counted on doing, is to suicide his submarine if it gets into trouble in a near war situation. You have 5 Norwegian soldiers on the border of Russia has disappeared. They did not return from patrol yesterday morning at 7 a.m. Local time. There is a fear that Russian Spetsnaz commandos may be crossing the border into Scandinavia, infiltrating, maybe ran into them and killed them. Nobody really knows. But the Copenhagen airport's been closed. Some airports in Germany have been closed now because of the drone swarms from Russia. They are using harassment. And this is all the border violations, all of these threats, these border incidents. This is like August 1939, before World War II started. It's very much like it. And I think there's a lot of indications we are in the preparatory period before World War III, and the Russians believe that we are. They also call that the overture, and where you have a lot of sabotage operations. You have fires like this, what was it, a refinery fire on the West Coast. You've got explosions, you've got sabotage in plants and factories. So, it looks like we're in a pre-war period now. And the Russians are mobilizing. Putin called up another 135,000 troops on Monday. Denmark started calling up troops. We know Poland already has. So, yeah, it looks like a pre-war situation.
Yeah, and especially considering those NATO potential breaches that Greg was talking about, and especially with their coordination with the Chinese and and the Iranians, but especially the Chinese are known for building up their drone swarms. So that's potentially something that, I mean, all the signs are there, and all the buildup is there, and
I should mention one other thing. You know, the French boarded a Russian tanker. I think it was in the English Channel. And why did they board it? Because they believed that the Russian drones were being launched from this tanker. That it was disguised to look like a tanker, but it was a drone carrier. And we're going to see more of this. And you know, the shadow fleet, they have taken, I've watched the feed while it was happening, just coincidentally, Russian tankers, Russian freighters just turning kamikaze and trying to ram other ships to cause sinkings, to block channels. Yeah, I watched one live in the Bosphorus some months ago. The Russians are engaged in a kind of terrorism on the high seas. And of course, dragging anchors to cut fiber optics cables, either, Russian ships, Chinese ships with Russian crews or other flagships with Russian captains, Chinese captains. Chinese are doing it in the Pacific. This is why it looks like the preparatory period before a major war.
Yeah, that's incredibly that's shocking, very very ominous. So, yes, something that we'll all have to be aware of. And I mean, in terms of where Russia stands right now, militarily and politically. Before I go on, Greg, what do you think? Did you want to add anything to that, or is that pretty much? Are you pretty much satisfied with that?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything Jeff was saying. I think that Russia wants to bring the Kaliningrad economy back, because Kaliningrad is isolated geographically, and under normal circumstances, that wouldn't be a problem. But because of the war in Ukraine, we have border closures in Lithuania and Poland. And so now it's very difficult for Russian goods to get to Kaliningrad because they have to cross through EU and NATO territory. Um, so, that's a big problem for Putin. Kaliningrad actually has a pretty big economy, so he would definitely want to make a land bridge to Kaliningrad, just like he wanted a land bridge to Crimea, and that's exactly what he did with the Ukraine war. A lot of people say, well, Putin, he's failing, and he's expended so many resources. Yeah, that's true, he has. But when you look at the amount of territory that the Russians have taken, Ukraine is huge. It's like bigger than the state of Montana. So even taking like 20% of Ukraine's territory it's massive. It's a lot of land, and it gives Russia a land connection to Crimea. And I think he's going to want to do that to Kaliningrad to bring Kaliningrad back into Russia, essentially. So that's a big motivation for that. But I totally agree with everything Jeff said, and we are in I believe, the beginning stages of World War III. And another thing that's very concerning is adding to what Jeff said, how we've had like 3.5 years of this war, and the Europeans are still not preparing for anything. There's no unified strategy. They don't have any like plan to deal with Russia. They kind of just react as things happen. So, like, for example, the drones now, not just in Poland, but then they had fighter jets in Estonia. Now there's drones every day in Germany and Denmark, and it's like when something happens, oh no, we have to have this emergency summit, and we have to discuss everything now and figure out what we're going to do. We could have planned this out years ago and anticipated that this was going to happen. So why are we suddenly now, figuring out what to do with these Russian drones? Russia has been using thousands of drones a week for the last 3 years in Ukraine. And now all of a sudden, 3 years later, the Europeans want to develop a counter drone Eastern shield along They were talking about making this shield along NATO's eastern front along Ukraine. Why are we doing this 3.5 years later? This should have been done when the war started immediately. We should have been, doing all of this. And so this tells me that the political leadership in Europe, especially Western Europe, where they're far away from the front, Poland, the Baltics, Finland, Romania, these countries historically have always been attacked by Russia, and they're basically NATO's buffer zone. I hate to say it, but it's true. When NATO admitted these countries into NATO, okay, Poland, the Baltics, Finland, Romania, these are buffer zone countries, border countries. NATO is not going to send all their forces into Poland or into the Baltics. The purpose of these countries is to function as a soak, to soak up the Russian forces when they come into Europe. Okay, so these are going to be the battlefields. They're not going to, France is not going to send 100,000 troops to defend Warsaw. Germany's not going to send 100,000 troops to defend the Baltics. No way. They may send a portion of their troops, but they're going to let Russia come in first, and they're going to use those former Eastern Bloc countries as a soak to weaken the Russian forces coming in. So that's something to keep in mind. But the leadership of Western Europe, they haven't learned the lesson after 3 years of this war. They have not done anything really. They have the European militaries haven't really built up their armies. They haven't built up their tank forces. They haven't built up their fighter jet forces. The only thing I think is that France is building up more of their nuclear forces. But as far as conventional militaries go, it's really just like Poland, Finland, Sweden, those, the Baltics. They're the ones that are really building up. The rest of Europe, they still aren't really doing anything. Another thing that's very concerning is that the reserve forces, okay, the Ukraine war proved the importance of having large numbers of reserves, and Europe does not have that. They have very small numbers of reserves because Europe has gone away from mandatory conscription. Okay, so what's going to happen if, let's say, France has 100,000 troops, and then half of them die or all of them die, and then there's nothing to backfill. Okay, Russia has millions and millions of people that they're willing to draft and send to the front. We're not willing to do that. Another thing too is everybody was saying how when Russia invaded Ukraine, they were laughing about the Russian troops, how they don't have boots, they don't have, their food is expired. They showed like the rations, and they were expired in like 2016. For me, as somebody who's a dual citizen of Poland and grew up the son of Polish immigrants, listening to stories from my grandparents who lived in, during the World War II era, and then, during the communist era. This is nothing new. Okay. If you talk to anybody from Poland or Eastern Europe, we knew this about Russia a long time ago. Okay. This is, for Americans and Western Europeans, this is like, oh my gosh, the Russians, they don't have, their rifles are rusty. They don't have enough ammunition. They're sending them out with no boots and improper clothing. This is the way Russia has always fought. Okay, if you look at World War II, that's exactly what they did in World War II. My grandma, who lived in the Polish countryside, she told me stories, and my family told me stories of when the Russians came in from the east, when they were fighting the Germans, when they were pushing the Germans back, when they were, getting closer to Germany after they defeated the Germans in Stalingrad, and they had momentum, and they started coming in from Russia. This is going back to the 1940s. The Russians, when they came into Poland, it was the same thing. They didn't have boots. They were all like really poor. Russia drafts the poorest, worst people in their society, and they use them as fodder. This is nothing new. They've done that in World War II. When they came through my grandma's town in the Polish countryside, they looted everything. They came in and they took people's jewelry. They ransacked everybody's homes. They didn't have proper clothing, but they still won. That's the scary thing. They still won. They still defeated the Germans in Stalingrad. And so the problem I see in Western Europe and here in the US is we underestimate Russia because we think that we have better missiles and better technology. But this is the way it's always been for Russia. Their war machine, it can be a little bit slow to get going, like in World War II when Hitler attacked Russia. You know, Hitler made a huge advances in the beginning, right? He went all the way to Stalingrad, but then once the Russian war machine was turned on, they pushed back the Germans and went all the way to Berlin. And I fear that we're at that position now where basically everybody's kind of underestimating Russia because they haven't taken any land. And Trump has been basically saying that in the last few months, Russia has gained no land. But Russia could be at that pause period now, okay, where they're just using drones. I mean, the thing is, too, is that, yeah, maybe Russia hasn't conducted any big offensives in the last year or two, but they're still doing an active, like, recovery phase. So it's not like the combat operations have completely stopped while they reconstitute their military. They're still putting pressure on Ukraine every single day, hundreds of drones, missiles. Okay, so they're in an active recovery phase where they're still putting pressure on the front lines, on Ukrainian society, on the West. They're still managing by themselves. Okay, Russia by themselves is waging this hybrid war against multiple European countries, against the Americans, and at the same time, they're still keeping pressure on the Ukrainian front lines and on their society with all the drone attacks. So I'm just afraid that we're underestimating Russia, and it could be like that Stalingrad situation where once that war machine turns on, it just becomes like an unstoppable force. You know, it's like a boulder rolling down a hill. You can't stop it, and Russia's economy now is fully in a wartime economy. So the survival of their economy is based around war. They can't stop fighting. They can't just suddenly say, okay, we've had enough. We're done in Ukraine. If they do that, their economy is going to collapse. So they have to continuously have some kind of war to fight. Otherwise, their economy is going to collapse. So, but yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to add.
No, that's I'm so glad you brought that up. Those are some very important points that I hope everybody listen to because yeah, it's definitely true that historically, things got really bad during Stalin's time. I mean, the Russians were under like no pressure like anybody's ever seen before, yet they still managed to take over, Eastern Europe, and and with that too. I mean, so it's with all the oil refineries and factories burning, it's like okay, like that's really good, and glad to hear it. But I mean, how far are they willing to go? And it's like well, they have to go all the way. They can't stop now. It just wouldn't make any sense. And it's especially important that you brought that up, Greg, because of course we know it's not just Russia advancing towards Ukraine. We know Russia sponsors the migration crisis into Europe, and there are agents of influence, shall we say, or hybrid warriors, that are sponsored by the Kremlin coming up through Mexico, and doing their sabotage activities, like what we saw. I mean, that is pretty hair raising what we saw at that California gas plant. How it went up in flames, and there's been a lot of that kind of thing going on past couple of years. I mean, not saying anything, but it's very it's very curious. So yeah, there's of course this is a global thing, and one of the things I wanted to perhaps if we could just zoom out more is maybe get your guys' ideas on you know what the broader game that is being played here. I mean, what what do you think? And in fact, I think Jeff, you have some intel on this. What do you know about this situation in Venezuela? and how the Venezuelans are, that this serves as something like another split, that the Trump admin is being led toward hook, line, and sinker. What do you think? Perhaps I've exaggerated that, but what do you
Well,
say, Jeff?
I think that the Russians, because their intention is to cut off the Baltic states, and they want to cut off. Really, it's part of a pressure. In order to collapse Ukraine, they can't take Ukraine from the front, so they're going to have to cut Ukraine off from its main supply routes run through Poland. And if they create a crisis in the Baltic states, if they can cut the main communications lines running from Poland, really, given that Hungary has cut its communications, its logistical supply lines to Ukraine, you only have to bomb a few bridges from Romania, and Moldova into Ukraine, and you could cut Ukraine off. Which it's Ukraine cannot maintain its front without continuous supply from the West. So I think they've got some notion in mind of how to cut Ukraine and weaken it by moving directly on Ukraine's suppliers, but not in a way that creates a direct all-out war, not at least right away. Maybe it's going to lead to that. And so their big problem is the American military. If the Americans can deploy several divisions to Europe and air forces to Europe, they can make that really difficult for Russia to basically apply the pressure it needs to cut Ukraine. So lo and behold, when Belarus does its mobilization, when Putin announced there's over 700,000 troops on NATO's border and this Operation Zapad 2025, suddenly Venezuela announced it's mobilizing 4.5 million men. Not a coincidence. The timing is not a coincidence. What we're going to find out in the coming days is that Venezuela, with Russian help, has hollowed out mountains, particularly the large mountain near Caracas, near Fort Tiuna. And that mountain, you will find, has tubes for 22 launch tubes for intermediate range ballistic missiles. There may be nuclear weapons there. And so Venezuela, the dictator there, Mr. Maduro, has claimed he's stronger than Saddam Hussein. And he's going to probably brag that he has WMDs. And he's probably going to say things like, come and get me. And there's going to be some incidents in the Caribbean. And right now, the 82nd Airborne is down there. The Marines are massing down there. They've reopened Roosevelt Roads. So it looks like we're headed for war in the Caribbean. And I think it's a war of distraction to help the Russians win in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, a lot of people have been saying, a tactical nuke may be used, but why use that when, as you control your enemies and you're leading them left, right, and center, and why do that? Why rush to do that when, as Greg said, that. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
You have another situation there, where basically the U.S. has asked for talks on withdrawing from Europe later in the year, and I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, it certainly seems to be the pattern that the Trump admin is progressively moving away from Europe. So, I mean, that's personally why I don't know what Greg thinks, but that's personally why I'm not confident in what. I'm not totally confident in what Trump has been saying recently, although maybe he really just doesn't really see what's going on and understand what's happening around him. But Greg, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yes. So I think for Trump, I think for him, it's now a personal situation with Putin. He feels disrespected because he knows that, first of all, Trump is obsessed with his public image, number one. He cares so much about what everybody thinks of him, and he watches social media. He's almost like a juvenile, type of person. He's like a kid. He's like a kid in a man's body, like a man child. Like he sits and, he watches and he gets into all these, like Twitter back in the day when he was on Twitter, so he knows that people were laughing at him because of how Putin disrespected him. And I think he basically finally woke up, and most of all, now he's on a warpath because he wants to get revenge on Putin now, because he feels like Putin took advantage of him. And for 6 months or more, he was bending over backwards to be nice. He invited him to Alaska. He threw Ukraine under the bus for Putin to try to get Putin to agree to a deal. And now he feels like, this is a personal thing. And so I don't think there's any going back. I don't think Trump is going to suddenly, make a deal with Putin or any of that stuff. But for Trump, this is personal because he feels like Putin disrespected him on the world stage, which is like the worst thing you can do for a guy like Trump. I mean, his ego is huge, and Putin just was running circles all over him. So now I feel like Putin or Trump is going to try to show the world that America is back, and we're the top dog. So I think he started doing that a little bit with Iran, with the strikes on Iran. First it was the Houthis, then it was Iran. Now we're doing the drug cartels. I think next it's going to be an attack on Maduro. I think Trump wants to eliminate Maduro and change the regime. And the purpose of that is multifold. Number one, like Jeff was saying, there's probably Russian weapons there that can strike our country. Number two, that would be like a demonstration to the world that, hey, don't mess with the U.S. We're back, and that would be a signal to Putin and to Xi Jinping. And so basically, I think Trump may potentially make an example out of Venezuela for the whole world to see. We kind of did that with Iran. And Iran wasn't really big enough. It was just, Trump, he likes these spectacles. He likes to show off America's power in different ways. So first it was in Iran, we used our stealth bombers for that. We didn't need to use our stealth bombers. A lot of experts said that was kind of unnecessary, but Trump did that on purpose because he wanted to show Russia and China our capabilities, that, hey, at any time I can fly a stealth bomber right over the Kremlin and drop a bomb right on your head. That's what that was all about. And then you notice when Putin was in Alaska, the B-2s flew over when he was there. Or was it the F-35s? I can't remember, but that was also part of that whole demonstration to Russia and China. And I think now he's going to be looking to do that again. Probably he's looking for easy victories. He doesn't want any big wars that bog you down. He wants quick, easy victories like Iran. Boom, we drop a couple bombs. Oh, look, America's got stealth bombers. We can bomb anything we want at any time. Now it's going to be the cartels and Venezuela, which will be an easy win for us. And so he doesn't like these big protracted wars. He likes quick demonstrations of power that have an effect of some kind. But I think for Trump, this is now personal, and he's really mad at Putin. I mean, last week when he met with Erdogan from Turkey on the sidelines of the UN, I mean, he couldn't go a single press conference without mentioning Putin multiple times. Even when he was at the generals meeting they had earlier this week, where all the generals came to Quantico, that was like one of the first things that he talked about was Putin. Okay, that was like the first topic, not the southern border, not drug smugglers, not, Hamas or anything else. Putin and Russia was the first thing he kind of talked about. And so that tells you where his mind is. Trump, he may seem juvenile, but he's not a stupid guy. And I think he sees that Russia and Putin are the larger rivals of the U.S., obviously. And so, but now it's a personal thing for him. But I agree, we can't fully trust, the U.S. supporting the Baltics. And I think that may be also part of Putin's calculation that, maybe he thinks he can go into the Baltics and the U.S. is not going to send a lot of forces or, things like that. So, but yeah, that's what I think about Trump.
Very, very interesting. That's I think that's like a a senior intelligence level assessment of Trump. That was very good. And yeah, I'm Jeff. What do you think about that, Jeff? And also, did you guys manage to, by any chance, listen to Putin's speech yesterday? Did either of you or Greg did you manage to glean anything from the speech he gave? Were there any significant things that you thought were interesting, Greg or Jeff?
Yes, there were a few things. Let me just check my notes here, but
Sure.
he did say that he said we have more weapons, nuclear weapons, than the U.S. So even though there's a different president now, he's still bragging about how much more powerful Russia's nuclear arsenal is. He's not afraid of Trump or anything. He also said something that he said that Russia knows someone is preparing nuclear tests, and we will do the same if they are conducted. I'm assuming he was talking about the U.S., that maybe he has intel that the U.S. is going to do tests. He also said that NATO instructors are actually participating in the fighting in Ukraine. So he was basically hinting at the fact that NATO countries he said NATO countries have been waging war against us. So that's another thing. He knows that he knows that NATO's basically at war with Russia, and he's kind of saying that. Those were some of the big things. He also mentioned, again, he said this multiple times. If you go back and watch a lot of his speeches, he has this thing about America being like the most powerful country. He really doesn't like that. And he said again, he said, there is no and will be no power in the world that will dictate to everyone what to do. Every power has its limit, kind of reiterating a lot of the same talking points he's had for the last like 30 years. And basically saying how America shouldn't be in a position to tell other countries what to do and influence everything. That really bothers him the most is he's really disgruntled. He's a disgruntled. The best way to look at him is a disgruntled ex-Soviet agent. Okay, he's mad that the Soviets lost the Cold War pretty much. Okay. Russia collapsed. They went through a financial crisis and they still haven't recovered, and America is still going on. And he's really mad about that. He's like a disgruntled employee, and he cannot let that go. And it really bothers him that America has this powerful military, powerful economy, and we can influence people. And that more than anything really drives him nuts. But he was still kind of reiterating his usual talking points, so no change really in his position.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, anything you did you watch the speech or anything you wanted to add?
No, I didn't watch it, but there's a rock, paper, scissors thing going on here. Look, the Russians have a completely different designed military than the U.S. And if you realize that it's designed to work together with China and North Korea and Iran, that it's not just a single thing. They're just not doing this by themselves. Then you begin to realize that there's a much more sophisticated game here. They play the information game and the intelligence game very well, um, and they have infiltrated the Western elites. They've compromised our business elites with their trade in China. They tried to compromise Europe with the gas trade. They still compromise a lot of people with the oil trade. They can't get India to stop trading Russia for oil. They can't do it. People need that stuff. So Russia has a number of important cards, in being India being one of them. India and China being, the BRICS alliance and all that. So, and it's strange to say, but our ace in the hole in a way is the fact that Trump is very inconsistent. It's impossible to tell where he's at. He says one thing one week, another thing another. Now, there's a bad side to that, is that U.S. policy doesn't seem consistent. But from the point of view of our enemies, they don't know what he's going to do. And it makes it very hard for them to calculate what they need to do to get where they want. So the goalposts can end up moving. The agreements don't get made. They were really counting on Trump pressuring Ukraine into some kind of concessions that would be fatal to Ukraine. Trump started to do that, and then he first he had a reaction from the Republicans in the Senate. Remember, Trump is only viable as long as he has the Republicans in the Senate because he's been impeached twice, and the Republicans in the Senate saved him twice from at the trial. So he needs the Republicans in the Senate, and Republicans in the U.S. Senate overwhelmingly support Ukraine. So all those people around Trump that want to push the dump Ukraine, get out of NATO narrative, they were very strong, in late February, early March. But when the privately, when the U.S. senators came on board and said, "Look, Mr. President, this won't fly," um, he has been changing his tune ever since. And of course, we don't know where he's going to end up because he's so flexible. There is an advantage to being completely flexible and in the moment, and that means that people can't predict you. And being predictable is dangerous. Trump's a moving target, and his policy is. So this makes it very difficult for Russia, and this also makes it possible for miscalculation in a larger war to come. So it's difficult to prognosticate.
Extremely, extremely indeed. I've got a question for you, Jeff, and then I want to ask about China, where China sits with this, and then we can close out and let you gentlemen get on with the rest of your day. If hopefully you guys have time, but I've got a question from One Tall Order. Do you think, and this is for you, Jeff, and Greg, feel free to weigh in. The question is, do you think we are being drawn into Venezuela to break our backs like a new Afghanistan and rile up the Sao Paulo formations or the Latin American communist bloc in preparation for the future war and their plans for an invasion of the United States? Jeffrey, what do you have to say about that?
The short answer is yes to all the above. That's exactly right. Exactly
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, One Tall Order has his answer. Okay. Fantastic. So, in that case, what, in terms of, satellite Soviet nations, where do you think that China is currently sitting with all this, guys, given that Russia has not performed as well as it had hoped, especially with the knowledge of, Minister Wang Yi, saying that they cannot afford for Russia to lose this war. So, do you guys, where do you think, are they just sitting there waiting for the next big, shoe to drop, or what do you think? Greg, do you want to go ahead, or?
Um, I'm not sure. I'm trying to understand the question a little better. So what do you want to know about China?
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm just thinking. China, amidst all of this, has been, rather quiet in terms of its military maneuvers, or in comparison with Russia. So what I'm trying to say is, we have Venezuela, you know, riling up South America, and distracting the United States, and then we have China, I guess, economically pumping Russia up. Do you think they're doing anything else, or is there any other signals or signs that we're seeing from the CCP and all
Right.
this, or how do you think they feel given this whole situation? Perhaps given all the extremely cogent points that you've brought up, perhaps they're feeling more confident. I'm not
Right.
really sure how to read it myself. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. So I think this is just this is my opinion. China, they're in no hurry. Okay. China is not in a hurry to go to war. Right now, everything that's happening is great for China. Why? Because you have the US and Russia going at it in Ukraine and expending resources. The US is expending resources, Europe is expending resources, and China's just sitting there watching it all go down, and they're just putting their money in their bank, building up their military, and so for them, it doesn't make sense for them to go into a war and start a conflict. They may send warships to Taiwan occasionally, or last year I think it was they went right outside of Sydney Australia, and they were doing a live fire exercise like 20 miles offshore. That doesn't mean that the invasion is coming next month or something. These are just periodical reminders to, Australia, Taiwan, all these countries that, hey, we're still here. It doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to be invading. For China to go to war right now, it would have to be something very serious that would be a threat to their security and more so their economy. They value their economy more than anything else. It would have to be something like, American factories going up in Taiwan. That would be like a direct threat to their, exports and stuff like that. But China right now, they're in a good position. They're just sitting back and watching all the great powers of the world, military and economic powers, duke it out, and they don't need to do anything because we are weakening ourselves. Russia's weakening themselves. The Europeans are weakening themselves by fighting each other. And meanwhile, they can just sit back and pick and choose when is a good time for them to make their move while we're, bogged down in a war in the Baltics or whatever the case may be, recession. But they're in no hurry to go to war. I also believe that China is waiting for Russia to collapse. I think they want the resources in Siberia. Siberia has everything that China needs. It has the timber, it has oil, gas, minerals of various kinds. Okay, water as well. Actually, the Chinese were running out of water, and they were asking Russia to run a pipeline from Lake Baikal, which is the deepest lake in the world. And they wanted to run a water pipeline from Lake Baikal into China. And Russia said no, thank God, because that was one decision that was good by the Russians, because that would have been an ecological disaster, draining out the deepest lake in the world. I mean, there's so much we don't even know about Lake Baikal just because it's, been under the Soviet Union for so many years. There's no like scientists there really. But anyway, China's going to wait for Russia to collapse, and then they're going to come in and pick up the pieces. I think eventually, depending on what happens, China could even try to take back parts of Siberia from Russia, because they did lose some of their land during the Cold War days. They did lose some of their land to the Russians, but I think they're just sitting back and waiting. There's no rush for them, and they're in a good position now. So I wouldn't necessarily be worried too much about China making any kind of big invasions. Not right now. I think that's further down the line. That would be like if Russia collapses, or then if Russia loses the war in Ukraine, and by lose I mean, they're just completely, their economy just falls apart, that they're done for. At that point, I would potentially consider China as a big threat, because then China would be looking, they would see that as an opportunity. But right now, I don't see a physical threat from them. And for them to attack Taiwan, Taiwan is heavily protected. They've been preparing for this for decades. It's not like Ukraine, where we started giving Ukraine weaponry in 2014. We started slowly giving them weaponry and training. Taiwan, they've been doing it for like, I don't know, 50 years. We've been giving them all kinds of weaponry and stuff. So it wouldn't be, and Taiwan is in the middle of the ocean. So it's not like they can just cross over a border like Russia did with Ukraine. They have to cross, 100 miles of ocean. They would be spotted a long way ahead, and all those ships would just be sunk by Taiwan's Air Force. Really, the only thing China could do would be to like nuke Taiwan. And then what would be the purpose of that? Because why would you nuke all the valuable chip factories there and everything else? That wouldn't make sense. But that would really be their only option for Taiwan, because an actual amphibious landing and taking it back by force would be so difficult, even if just Taiwan fights by themselves. Not to mention the US would definitely get involved. So yeah, I don't think China wants a part of Taiwan, at least not anytime soon. But yeah, I don't see China as an immediate threat right now. I think they're just hanging out. It's good for them. Why rush into a war, if they're doing good? So
Brilliant analysis. That's amazing. Jeff, did you have anything to say, or is there, do you dovetail from
Yeah,
that?
no, it's very interesting what he says because my view is so different from his. China has put way more into this war against Ukraine than the United States. They are shouldering the economic burden of this war. If you talk to some experts on the Russian economy, the Russian economy is being held up by China, and it's a tremendous shoulder to the wheel that China is doing. And when North Korean troops go to Russia to fight, Chinese troops come into North Korea to replace them, to stand in those positions. So China has really picked up a huge amount of slack. Look, when before Putin invaded Ukraine in 2022, he went to Beijing. They were having the Olympics there. That was February of 2022. And they announced an unlimited partnership. And they said this is the most powerful combination since World War II of any two powers. China and Russia are together. The defector, Colonel Stanislav Lunev, who I worked with and I knew personally, he spoke fluent Mandarin. He worked in China for the Russian General Staff. He said that in 1992, early 92, late 91, when the Soviet Union had collapsed, Russian and Chinese generals and leaders got together and they signed secret intelligence protocols and secret agreements about a future war with America and how to divide America up. Russia would get Alaska and most of Canada, and China would get the lower 48 states, with other countries invited in for looting rights. It was a very serious project. It was part of what he gave to the United States when he defected. And since then, we have seen statements out of China that confirm it, like the secret speech of Chiao Chen. They are committed to making war on the U.S. China taking Siberia, what? 12 million people can live in Siberia. Well, only because the Russians make a lot of people live there. Probably if people had a choice, you'd probably only have 6 or 7 million people living in Siberia. It's a terrible place. It's, yeah, there's some resources there, but there's not food. That's the main resource. China can't feed itself. They need arable land. They don't need Siberia. It's a big nothing. It's a lot of land, but it's empty nothing. The Russians, if you look at the secret speech of Chiao Chen, the Chinese say they made a deal with the Russians, trading land in the north. He didn't specify what, probably Alaska and Canada, for the lower 48. And that they made this deal because they need to make a second China in North America. That's why they're infiltrating Latin America. That's why there's a huge Chinese and communist presence in Mexico, Venezuela, Central America, why they were, before this administration, controlling both of the ports of entry on the Panama Canal, why they're building the biggest port. It's going to be the biggest port in South America, in Peru. And of course, they currently run a whole terminal, not supervised, in that port that services Sao Paulo in Brazil. So they're all over Brazil. They're all over these countries. I mean, Brazil is essentially a communist country, like Venezuela, like Cuba, like Nicaragua. Their plan is to invade North America, to bomb and invade us. This is what Lunev said. This is what Chiao Chen said in his secret speech, the former defense minister of China. Um, and this is what they're trying to build up to. And the Russians are trying to break the back of the NATO alliance because what they want is they want a war in which America has no allies, in which we abandon our allies or they abandon us, and everybody cuts a separate deal. The next thing China is going to do is put pressure on Japan to abandon the US. They're going to threaten at some point Japan with attack or blockade. They're not going to invade Taiwan. Some people say they will. I think it's only a blockade because once Taiwan is surrounded by waters controlled by the Chinese Air Force and Navy, they have to surrender. Nobody has to invade it. You just have to blockade it. They're not self-sufficient. Any island like Japan or Taiwan that is not self-sufficient, if you control the water around it, they're going to surrender. You don't need to invade it. The places you need to invade, Baja California to invade the United States, Canada, Alaska, set up for an invasion of the mainland of the US. And that takes a lot of time, a lot of strategy, and a lot of mistakes on the American side.
Very interesting. Okay, so that's interesting. There's a lot at play there, but you make your mind up, the viewer, at how this will transpire. But it looks like Yeah, given the right conditions, they will attempt some sort of incursion into the Pacific, or we shall see. We shall see. So, in terms of more kind of reflections and warnings and personal stuff, I guess. As someone preparing for collapse scenarios, Greg, what do you think the average American or European should be doing right now?
Yeah, so this may sound crazy, but you need to have a fallout shelter. This is something that it's very basic, and it's not hard to either find a fallout shelter close to where you live, or even in the basement of your home, or if you live in an apartment. That is super critical, because if this does go nuclear, which I believe it will at some point, um, you have to keep in mind that fallout, first of all, fallout can travel very far. It can travel hundreds of miles. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a full scale exchange of nuclear weapons. We send 1,000 warheads, they send 1,000 back. It could be a limited exchange, but even that would be enough for the fallout to get to your area. Now, the thing with fallout radiation is that it breaks down relatively quickly compared to nuclear power plants. Like, one of the things that I encounter a lot as a prepper, when I see people in my chat or in the comments, they say, well, I'm not going to prepare for nuclear war because it's going to be a radioactive wasteland for hundreds of years. But that they're thinking about like nuclear power plants melting down, which is completely different from a nuclear war. If we assume that the US and Russia and China, if they only use just standard nuclear warheads, not salted warheads. Salted warheads are just warheads that you can think of them as like a dirty bomb. They basically add special materials that make it more radioactive, okay, to basically irradiate large areas for many years, typically 5 to 10 years. But if we assume just standard warheads exchanged, you're talking on average about 2 weeks before the radiation levels drop over 90%. So really 2 weeks of sheltering is what you need to prepare for. And the first 48 hours are the most. That's when the radiation is so high that if you're outside for just a few minutes, you'll get a lifetime dose of radiation. And that's where you get, you're basically done for. Very slow and painful death. But there's something called the 7-10 rule for radiation. So for every factor of 7 in time, the radiation breaks down by a factor of 10. So, for example, if there was fallout landing right now on your house, 7 hours from now, the radiation would be 10 times less, and then another 7 times 7, another factor of 7. So 49 hours, it would be 100 times less, because then you have another factor of 10. So just 48 hours, the radiation will subside by 100 times. And then if you do another factor of 7, it'll drop by 1,000 times. Okay, so the time is your friend. You need to have adequate shielding to be able to survive at least the first couple of days, depending on your proximity to nuclear war targets. But it sounds very intimidating, like you need to build a huge bomb shelter and stuff, but you really don't. I've done a lot of videos on my channel of different structures, and I've actually gone to my local city and walked around, and within 30 minutes I was able to find like half a dozen buildings that would be suitable for a fallout shelter. I mean, just literally walking around downtown, in 30 minutes I was able to find, um, different structures. So you need to find some kind of a shelter that can protect you from radiation if it does go nuclear. If you have a basement in your house, that's suitable. If you have a basement in your apartment building, that's even better. We obviously don't have time to get into all the specifics of shielding and stuff like that, but underground structures are generally the best. So if there's like a metro station near you, a train station, like for example in New York City has Grand Central Terminal, something underground, that's going to be the best. Old caves, mines, if you have abandoned mines in your area, stuff like that. Basements, any kind of like underground access tunnels for utilities. Those could be used as well. But if you can't find anything underground, then you can find above ground structures, but they have to be made of some kind of thick concrete or stone. Like for example, a multi-story office building can actually be a good fallout shelter, because the fallout will land on the ground, and it'll also land on the roof of buildings, right? So you're going to want to be halfway between the roof and the ground. You don't want to be too close to the ground. So if you have a 10-story building, you're going to want to be like on the 5th floor. So you have equal distance from the radiation coming from the fallout on the roof to the fallout on the ground. And that can actually be even better if you're in like a multi-story apartment building that's made of brick, like 5-6 story apartment building made of bricks or something, even, or concrete. That can actually be better than certain basements, because you're high up. If you're like on the 3rd floor, the building's made of brick, that can actually be better, because also distance is your friend as well. So that would be my recommendation. Also, obviously have a go bag or bug out bag, just a backpack, filled with basic supplies for survival. There's a good picture right there illustrating what I was just talking about. You want to have a bug out bag or a go bag, because you never know when things are going to happen. It could be when you're not home and you're not near all your equipment and everything, all your supplies. So you want to have a bag that can get you back home or to a safe location. And now is the time to think about, it's not just enough to have a backpack. You also need to have a plan. What's your plan? Where are you going to go if you're at work and your job is 50 miles from home, and something happens, whatever that may be, a nuclear attack or whatever, a cyber attack, the grid goes down. They could try to take our grid down with a cyber attack. What's your strategy? Where are you going to go? How are you going to get home if there's no electricity? If your vehicle doesn't work, if it's like an EMP situation, whatever the case may be, the roads may get clogged up, everybody trying to leave the city at the same time. So you have to think of all these things, and a lot of it is mental. It's not just what gear you have and material stuff. It's your skills, your knowledge, and being able to plan things out and figure out what do you do in different contingencies. What's your plan? So have plans. That's very, very important. How are you going to get home, or what's a safe area for the time being? Have like multiple safe areas or safe houses, whatever places that are going to be pretty safe and you can reasonably get to them. Another thing I see with a lot of preppers or people that get into prepping is they don't have a realistic view of preparedness, because a lot of these people just don't have either military experience or any kind of real world experience, in the outdoors, actually using equipment, you know, actually hiking 20, 30, 40, 50 miles with, a go bag on you. It can wear you out quite a bit. So, be realistic with your plans. Don't go overboard. Know your limits. And over time, as you get into prepping more, you can, get better at different things, and you can expand those limits. But stay within your limits. Don't have like these very kind of almost fantasy plans that they sound great. Like, oh, I'm going to walk home 50 miles or 100 miles. When have you ever done that? Have you ever walked 50 miles, multiple days through forested, hilly terrain with ticks and rattlesnakes and predators and cold, extreme temperatures. It's one thing if you leave your house and you go for a hike for 3-4 hours and you come home back to AC or back to the heat, but you're going to be out in the elements all the time. If it's wintertime, you're going to be out there day and night exposed to, sub-freezing temperatures the whole time. Or if it's the summertime, you're going to be exposed to heat and insects and different things like that. So you really have to be realistic, and it's not about being macho. uh, you know you don't want to basically endanger yourself because of your plans are not realistic. You can actually do more harm to yourself than the threats around you, if you bite off more than you can chew. So obviously practicing with your gear, getting in shape, and knowing your local area is important as well. Spend a lot of time in the area where you live outdoors, because when you bug out or there's any kind of situation like that, you're going to be outside. So you want to be very familiar with your terrain. What's the climate like? What kind of wildlife is there? Everything, and that's just something that takes time. And there's no quick solution to that. But the sooner you get started, the sooner you'll be prepared. So yeah, that's kind of a general overview. Another thing, going back to the fallout, is you definitely want to brush up on basic radiation principles. um, I have a lot of information on my website and on my channel. Just understanding the principles of radiation, understanding how nuclear warfare would play out, the principles of nuclear warfare. Most people don't understand, the different types of weapons and how they would be used and what the targets are. Um, I've done lots of videos. I have a whole playlist on my channel for nuclear war survival. And then on my website, I have quick reference guides like to radiation doses and things like that. Like see nuclear war survival, frequently asked questions. I talk about all different kinds of things here. You're going to want to have a dosimeter. That would be one thing you definitely want to get. And it's important to have a dosimeter, not a Geiger counter. The dosimeter is going to do everything a Geiger counter can do, but it will also calculate your dose that you're receiving from the radiation and keep track of it over time. I also have an analog dosimeter. So you get a digital one like this one that you're showing, and then you can get like these little, they're like the size of a credit card, and they're chemically activated. So that one, you're not reliant on batteries or anything like that can fail. There's the card right there. So you need to keep track of your radiation dose. You need a way to do that. Those chemical ones, those cards, I think they're like $20 US on Amazon. It's a no-brainer. They expire like every 2 or 3 years, but get a couple of them, give one to everybody in your family. This way, if something happens, you have that in your wallet. You may not even have your bug out bag, but you have that, and you'll be able to know, okay, do I need to seek shelter? Am I being exposed to radiation? Because radiation, you cannot see it. So there could be some kind of contingency that happens, and it could be hundreds of miles away, and the news cycle hasn't even picked up on it yet. And there could be radiation in your area, and nobody knows, because nowadays in most Western countries, we don't have like radiation sensors like we did in the Cold War to, detect if there's any radiation or anything. So nobody would know, and you'd be walking around getting high doses of radiation. So that's another thing that I would say is very important.
That is amazing information. So definitely check out NYPrepper's YouTube channel and especially that playlist to and just follow him. Look at what he's doing. Especially, I would say, if you live in a city. I mean, you better be listening to him if you're a city slicker like me. But yeah, so very very good information. Thank you for that. Hopefully, you have time for some closing final thoughts, Greg. Jeff just left, so that's okay. But I'm hoping we can get some final thoughts from you. And that is, what do you think is the single most important thing people should understand about Ukraine, Russia, and what comes next, and perhaps even what historical lessons we should remember as we look at this conflict happening right now?
Yeah, so I mean, in my opinion, it's just history repeating itself. Um, if you study like World War II, none of the countries in World War II, especially the U.S., we were the last ones to be involved in World War II. We refused to get involved even when Hitler was invading multiple countries in Europe. We didn't want to get involved, and we thought that by just keeping it isolated to Europe that it would never affect us. And then sure enough, Pearl Harbor happened, and then the Germans were sending U-boats to the coast of the U.S., and then we finally had to get involved. So I fear that we're in that same mentality now, where it's deep down we know that this is a serious war, but we don't want to confront that reality, and we would rather just say, "Oh, it's only happening in Ukraine. We'll just give them weapons, and hopefully that'll solve the problem." But it's still going on after 3.5 years. It's still happening, and Russia's made it clear, okay, hundreds of times that Ukraine is an existential threat to them. Okay, so that means that Putin is not going to stop until he feels that the threat of Ukraine is neutralized. Whatever that threat is, it can change at any time, however he's feeling that day. But I think at this point, there's no signs that this is going to end. The only potential thing that could end the war is if the U.S. This is where the U.S. has a potential now to really, if Trump makes the right decisions, he could potentially collapse the Russian economy because even until now, under the Biden administration, the U.S. hasn't really truly flooded Ukraine with weapons and support. We've kind of only given it to them, like ad hoc as they needed, bare minimum, old weapons, just the bare minimum to keep them fighting. But if we really wanted to, we haven't, even here in the US, we're not in a wartime economy. Russia's in a wartime economy, but the US isn't. I mean, we haven't really picked up our production that much. Neither has Europe. If Europe and the US really get united and have a plan, and they have an aggressive plan, not, oh, we're just going to give Ukraine the bare minimum as it's needed, reactionary, not proactive, then it's gonna make it worse, But if we really have a plan and a strategy and we get united, I think is a possibility that we could put enough pressure on Russia's economy to make Russia collapse. Like what I'm hearing yesterday was the big news that the U.S. is now going to be giving Ukraine intelligence so they can conduct deep strikes on Russia's oil. And so what that tells me is I think the Trump administration in their calculations thinks that if they really turn the heat up on Russia's oil and energy, that they can collapse the economy of Russia, and that would potentially lead to the collapse of the Putin government. And so now they want to help Ukraine as much as they can, basically, because Ukraine started hitting those oil sites, and I think the Trump administration sees how successful they have been with just basic Ukrainian weapons, just, drones and nothing crazy, nothing super advanced, a couple of Storm Shadow missiles. But I think that Trump is like, okay, what if we actually give Ukraine long range precision weaponry? We give them stuff that we would use, and let's see what they can do, and So I think that's the strategy of Trump, is they want to take out the lifeblood of Russia's economy. Like I said earlier, the question at that point is, will Putin then decide to do something drastic? Because he's not stupid either, and he knows that the U.S. is going to basically try to undermine him by going after the oil, which is the lifeblood of his war machine. So he may start to see that, and he may do something drastic like launch missiles at Europe, taking out military bases in Europe, or attacking European capitals, or nuking Ukraine. That's something that we didn't really touch on, but I still think that's a very, very real possibility, that if Ukraine starts to get the upper hand, if the U.S. is really supporting them a lot, giving them Tomahawk missiles, intelligence, whatever, and Russia really starts to hurt from that, I think we could also see Putin nuke Ukraine. So it's not, unfortunately, there's no like magic answer. It can go in any direction. The only thing we can do is just pray and hope that that doesn't happen. But there's no easy answer. There's no easy way out of it, unfortunately.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And with the leadership in Europe and the US, it's kind of just made whatever, good or near perfect solutions that could have been implemented, decades ago. That's kind of seemingly, not as likely. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Hopefully there is, things can be better if we do the right things now.
Right.
Hopefully things can be better than originally thought, but we'll never know unless people actually start, I guess, maybe writing to their local congressman or something to, amp up I mean, everybody can play a part, to whatever degree, and it all matters, and everybody can, you know, the physical prepping of course is really good, but I think also, it's never too late to politically prep, you know perhaps even your kids to you know get them prepped for because we're going to need more. I mean, there are so many agents and things like that, that have infiltrated, Europe's various European spheres and all over the Western world. But there needs to be an answer by true patriots, like Greg and Jeff, to turn back the tides of all this. And a good thing we're seeing from all this is I think we're seeing a continued solidification of things are pretty choppy right now. Things are pretty rough, with what's being kind of put together. But I think we are seeing like a revival of the European and American
Right.
spirit slowly from that. I think they're beginning to mirror what the Eastern Europeans, the Eastern Europeans are signaling, like, it's time to get ready. It's time to get serious here, guys. And I think there are at least some in the U.S. and the rest of Europe that are beginning to mirror that. So hopefully, yeah, there are no perfect solutions, but it's better than letting things get worse by not being strong now. So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Mm.
I wanted to also add, if I may,
Sure.
about what Jeff said about China. I'm not very far away from what Jeff's position is on China. The only thing I think is that I don't think China's an immediate threat. I think it's kind of more of a longer term threat, because China also doesn't have enough nuclear warheads yet. China's in the process of building out their nuclear arsenal, and that's going to take a couple more years. The CIA estimated that by 2030 at the latest, so within 5 years, they would have 1,000 deployed warheads, maybe even more. Some estimates are even sooner, like 2027. So I don't think China's going to make any big moves until they feel that their nuclear arsenal is big enough to go toe to toe with the U.S. Because if you were to invade the U.S., you better make sure you have enough warheads, because we're going to immediately, launch all of ours. And so China needs to have enough nuclear weapons to make them, on the same playing field. And right now they don't, but they're rapidly building their warheads up. So that's why I don't think in the short term there's any major physical threat from them in the short term. But I think as time goes on, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like the U.S., from what I can see, and of course your opinion is a lot more valuable than mine, that the U.S. sort of has China in a bit of a checkmate in the sea, and of course,
Right.
they're kind of landlocked by all those countries, so all they can really do is feed soldiers into Russia's war effort in Ukraine. But yeah, I tend to agree. Yeah, not the thing that they can really do is just aid in hybrid warfare, and but yeah, it's to take on the United States. That is like that is a huge undertaking. That is not.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's you almost can't really fathom it because they're so powerful. But I think do you think that's another thing, a question. Do you think, Greg, that the Trump administration is do because I think that they think similarly along the lines of what you just said, um, or maybe not. Do you think they're taking that seriously? Do you think that the response or yeah, the tactic they're taking with that is adequate? Do you think we're seeing something more comprehensive in terms of ensuring that China doesn't become too powerful or anything like that? Do you have any thoughts, any signs or signals coming from the White House by any chance?
Not yet. But I really hope so, because we only have like 1,500, or I don't know the exact number, but it's roughly like 1,500 deployed warheads. Russia also 1,500. Those were the limits under the START treaty that was signed by Obama in 2012. Now the START treaty is gone since I think it was last 2024. I want to say early 2024 or 2023. I can't remember. But the START treaty is completely gone, and that was the biggest disaster, because during the START treaty, when we first signed it, uh, I don't know exactly how many deployed we had, but we had a significantly much larger nuclear force. And now we have basically the same warheads as Russia, which on paper they probably have more, because they haven't allowed inspectors into their country like we have. So they probably have, they even during the treaty days when the treaty was still active, I still think they were hiding a lot of warheads and not abiding by it 100%. But even if they were, okay, let's say they had 1,500 deployed, we have 1,500 deployed. That still doesn't account for China, which right now China has like 400 or 500, and then in 2 to 5 years they could have 1,000. So then that means that China and Russia together would have double the amount that we have deployed. So under the Obama administration, when they signed that deal, we had to remove 2 warheads from each Minuteman. Every Minuteman missile has 3 warheads per missile, and there's 400 of them that are actually on standby at any moment's notice to launch. So we went down from 1,200 warheads on the Minutemans to just 400. And then in the subs, which the U.S. has 2/3 of its nuclear arsenal deployed in the submarines. Okay, so our bomber force and our silos make up a small amount of the total number of warheads we have deployed. It's only like 30% or so. So really, America's submarines are the backbone of our nuclear arsenal. And under the Obama administration, when we signed the treaty, the START treaty, we had to remove 4 Trident missiles from every one of our Ohio class subs. So
Huh.
normally they have 24. They have 24 launch tubes. We went down from 24 to 20 each, and that may not sound like a lot, but 4 Trident missiles can carry over 40 warheads. So that's 40 warheads per submarine, and officially 14 of them are dedicated to nuclear. So, that's a lot of warheads and a lot of missiles that were removed from the backbone of um, our nuclear arsenal. And then you have the bombers. We converted several of our B-52s and B-1s. The B-1s were completely taken out of nuclear use and now just used for conventional purposes. And then a large number of B-52s were converted to conventional as well to abide by the limits in the treaty. And then we also have sort of removed, not really removed, but we've really capped the number of warheads we have in Europe quite a bit. So just recently, I think it was last year, mid to late last year, we moved some nuclear warheads back to the UK. So that's a good first step. I don't remember. I think that was under Biden. I don't know if the US is going to do that now under Trump, but we moved B-61 nuclear gravity bombs to the UK, which they haven't been there since the end of the Cold War. So that's a good first step. There's also talks of Poland potentially being part of NATO's nuclear strike force. Poland is now a support country for NATO's nuclear strike force. So Polish pilots have already been trained on deploying the nuclear warheads with their F-16s and soon F-35s. They've already been trained because they're considered a support country. So what that means is obviously providing whatever support is needed, typically like fighter escorts, clearing the airspace for the main strike force, but also their pilots are trained on delivery of the bombs. So if, let's say, the primary countries for whatever reason get taken out and they can't deliver the weapons, then Poland could do it. So there's talk about doing that. But yeah, it's really our nuclear arsenal has really been hollowed out by that START treaty. And now that the treaty is gone, I haven't seen any indications by the Trump administration that they want to go back to it. I really don't think, based on Trump's prior term in office, for Trump was the guy who eliminated the INF, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, because he said that Russia was deploying medium range missiles that could strike Europe. So he said, we're not going to abide by it anymore if Russia's not abiding by it. So he pulled us out of the INF. And then he was in the process under his Defense Department in the latter days of his first term. He was in the process of building I think it was a sea-launched cruise missile, like longer than a Tomahawk, and that would be capable of delivering nuclear warheads deep into Russia from the sea. And that was going to be his counter to what Russia was deploying in Belarus and Western Russia during his first term. So based on his track record, the fact that he pulled out of the INF and then he had plans to build that long-range sea-launched nuclear missile, which then got scrapped under the Biden administration, didn't continue that when his term ended. Given his track record, I think that he's not going to go back to the START treaty. I really hope that he does rearm our arsenal. The thing is that the decision has to be made now. You can't mull it over several more months and say, oh, do we want to do this? Is it going to escalate? Is that going to cause another arms race? If we keep debating about it for months and months and months, you have to make the decision now, because Russia has already made the decision. They've already pulled out of the START treaty, which means that they're intending on an arms race. That Russia's already decided, okay, we don't care. All right, we don't care about an arms race. Bring it on. And we're over here still thinking, well, do we want to do this? Do we want to escalate? Blah, blah, blah. the longer we delay, the worse it is going to be for us, because rearming our missiles, it's not an overnight process. All of these warheads, hundreds and hundreds of warheads, hundreds of different missiles, dozens of different planes, they all have to be retrofitted, and a lot of these warheads are in storage, so they got to bring each warhead out one at a time, put them on trucks, and then they have to drive them to the missile sites and pull the missiles out one at a time, put them back on, and then they have to recalibrate the whole missile. It's not like you just slap the warhead on and you're good to go. You have to put the warhead on, recalibrate everything. There may be some testing involved. They may have to test launch some of these missiles. So it's not that straightforward of, we'll just put the warhead back on and we're good to go. It's a long process. One that took by Obama's 2 terms to complete.
Wow.
So we got to get on that now and start doing that now, because it's not a 1 week process. It takes months and years. But immediately, the quickest thing that we can do is send more nuclear gravity bombs to Europe. That's easy to do, and train more of European countries to deliver them. And then converting more of our bombers back to nuclear duty. That's actually probably easier than the other one, the transferring bombs to Europe. Less controversial too. Just the bombers, they're all still capable of delivering nukes. It's just, the technical features of, the way that the bombs are held, the bomb bays and the pylons under the wings. There's some mechanical work that would need to be done, but it's nowhere near as extensive as, rearming Minuteman missiles that are in silos, or, rearming submarines, which takes a long time too, because the submarines there has to be a certain number of them that are on patrol and on standby at any given time. You cannot just take them all out of duty and then rearm them. It would have to be done one at a time. They'd have to be rotated out from combat duty back to, port. And it's a slow process. It would take, I would say, at least 2 years to do. So it's not going to be quick. So our bombers would be the first place that we should start, in my opinion. And then the Minutemans.
Man, hearing you talk really makes me wish you were president right now, Greg. Seriously, I mean, if you ran for president, I would definitely vote for you, and I think definitely 100% of the people in chat would too. So here's hoping that you'll be president soon. I'm hopeful, at least. I really am. But yeah, but no, at least you're. So we have that to look forward to, President Greg. President NYPrepper, but you're educating the public on these crucial matters. Like, we're so honored to have you on. Hector, did you have anything you wanted to say, or anything you wanted to ask Greg? Or
No, it's been good. I've just been trying to keep the tabs and what I'm showing on screen up to date with what you guys been talking about. So
yeah,
that's been taking a lot of my attention, honestly. But
yeah,
I know it's been a great discussion. Thank you very much, NYPrepper. We'll start wrapping it up now. And thanks to Jeff Nyquist for also joining in today. He had to leave a bit earlier, but that's all right. It's good that he dropped by. Make sure you follow Jeff and Greg on their respective social medias. I've put the links in the description. And also give this stream a like if you want. So there you go. So sure, I'll start wrapping up now if everyone's good to go.
Yeah, I'll just say, we've got future stuff in the works. We're gonna hopefully collab with Greg in the future, or we're like to coordinate some interesting people on his show, as long as he's amenable to that, of course. And it's just been a huge privilege and an honor to speak to a true patriot like you, Greg. And that was absolutely fascinating, and would love to have you on again with Jeff or whoever. Obama. No, not Obama. Obama's not allowed on this show. Just jokes.
Who knows? Maybe Obama or Trump will call in next time. You never know what's going to happen.
Maybe we could have Obama, Trump, and Greg, and we could that have like a face off, and yeah, Greg, I'm sure will just demolish both of them. But yeah,
Greg's
that's
too busy. He has to go to his trucker rally, so he can't make it today.
yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, that's all right. Your trucker rally actually looked pretty cool.
yeah, that looked awesome.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
it fun?
It's
Did you
fun.
enjoy that?
Yeah, it's important to break away from all the serious stuff periodically. At least for me, that's how one of the ways I find balance, and kind of get back to some clear thinking is, going to the truck shows, working on my truck, and going to the woods, just disconnecting from everything. I try to do that. I think it's important that we do that. Whatever your interests are, whatever they are, so just try to find some balance in your life so you don't burn yourself out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so true,
absolutely.
bro. So true, man. That's so true. Yeah, and of course, always keep close to God. Maintain your relationship with God, and then and yeah, and no, very very true. So yeah, so good things to come for all of you guys in the chat. We've got some or yeah, going to be talking to Greg about some future stuff that I think he's interested in, and yeah, huge thanks again. Shout out to NYPrepper. Check his Amazon page out, and check all his. He's doing a service to humanity here. Yeah, man.
I haven't
Sorry, go ahead.
I haven't updated this page in a while. I got to do that actually.
Yeah, yeah. They should get you like to sell trucks. I reckon that would be cool. That would
That
be
would be fun. Yeah, it's
yeah.
so many of these different things. It's hard to find time to do everything. Sometimes it can be
Mm,
very difficult because you want to work with so many different sponsors, and then and on top of that, you gotta manage all your different pages, and then you gotta post your videos too. And so it can really it's hard to do everything you really want to do sometimes.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. But at least you're doing it, in whatever capacity it is. So that's the main thing. So yeah, and we're happy just to help out with that in whatever way we could. So yeah, no, hugely grateful, and looking forward to future stuff. So yeah, thanks.
There's Jeff's blog as well
Oh
for
yeah,
anyone
there's
interested. I've posted that link in the chat. Also, it's also in the description. So
yeah,
follow Jeff's Twitter, Twitter X, and blog. Lots of great
sweet.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, sweet as. Okay, awesome. So Hector, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for everyone for joining in. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I hope everyone in chat is having a lovely day and enjoyed the show also. I hope you have the great rest of your week. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you follow all of our guests on their respective channels and social media pages. Like and subscribe if you like this sort of content and you want other similar interviews. We will see you next time. I believe we've got. Do we have a show lined up for next week, or is that still in the
Uh,
works?
possibly. There's multiple things going on. Possibly. That's all I can say. There's just so much going on, so many people. Yeah, that's all I can say for now. But definitely, yeah, I'm coordinating with various people to. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you'll see
Well,
some interesting things in the
yeah,
future,
we've
anyhow.
definitely got some cool people in the pipeline. Who knows? Maybe even New York Prepper will jump back on one day.
Hopefully.
That would be awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
cool.
Sweet.
All right.
Sick.
All right, yeah, it was absolutely really informative. It's been like probably there's more information packed into this episode than any of our previous ones. Like a lot
Mm.
to take in there in regards to multiple topics. Thanks for everyone. We'll see you all next time. Stay blessed, not stressed, and have a great rest of your day.
See ya.